Iran beschuldigt Israel, am Montag einen Luftanschlag auf das iranische Konsulat in der syrischen Hauptstadt Damaskus durchgeführt zu haben. Unter den 13 Todesopfern befand sich auch General Mohammad Reza Zahedi, Irans ranghöchster General in der Region Syrien und Libanon. Während Israel keinen Kommentar dazu abgegeben hat, bestätigte die US-Regierung die Verantwortung Israels. John Kirby, der Sprecher des Nationalen Sicherheitsrates der USA, betonte deutlich, dass die USA selbst nicht daran beteiligt waren. Warum zeigt Washington so offensichtlich auf Israel als Verantwortlichen für den Luftangriff? Haben die USA Angst vor dem Iran?
Well, I think in this case, it's a statement of the obvious. The Israel attacked. I mean, there's no denying it. Israel, hasn't denied it. They just haven't taken credit for it. But I don't think there's anybody in the world who believes that this was done by anybody other than Israel. The other thing is the idea that the United States wasn't aware of the intelligence that underpinned this attack is absurd. We have American intelligence, professionals embedded with Israel at every level. The United States has been working with Israel on developing attack plans against Iran for years now. We may not have approved of this attack, but we definitely knew about the intelligence and we knew about Israel's intent to attack. I think the United States is doing its best to avoid a dangerous escalation. They're in a situation where Israel is behaving like a petulant child, doing whatever it wants, throwing a temper tantrum, and the United States is sort of like the parent that's powerless to stop this child from throwing these tantrums. So I think what the United States is doing is trying to set the stage in terms of the facts of the situation, and then work with the rest of the world, Iran, to prevent this from spiraling out of control. I think the goal of the United States is to keep this conflict confined to Gaza and Israel, and not have it, expand. But this attack, I think we should emphasize how much this attack hurt Iran, because it wasn't just killing, this senior General Mohammad Reza Zahedi. He was the commander of a region, and under three other very senior Iranian leaders there, one who ran the Palestinian operation, that is the man who is responsible for resupplying Hamas, the man who's responsible for coordinating with the Huthi in Yemen, who are carrying out very effective attacks, and the man responsible for coordinating the pro-Iranian militias in Iran and in Syria, militias who recently launched a successful attack against an Israeli port. To have all of these people and other people underneath them who were likewise involved in this killed at one time is a devastating blow to Iran's regional operations. And there will be an Iranian response. And so I guess the question now is, what can the United States do to mitigate this response, to try and convince Iran not to, carry out something that would be of such magnitude that would require an Israeli counterstrike on Iranian territory. But this was a heavy blow to Iran, a very heavy blow to Iran. And I think the United States is concerned about where this might head.
Laut dem Wiener Übereinkommen von 1961 genießen Konsulate besonderen Schutz und können somit nicht als legitime militärische Ziele anvisiert werden. Auch Israel gehört zu den Unterzeichnern des Übereinkommens. Der todbringende Luftangriff auf das iranische Konsulat in Damaskus stellt einen eklatanten Bruch des Wiener Übereinkommens dar. Welchen Zweck verfolgen der israelische Ministerpräsident Benjamin Netanjahu und das israelische Militär damit? Warum verstoßen sie so offensichtlich gegen international gültiges Völkerrecht?
Well, I find it interesting that the world is suddenly waking up to the fact that Israel violates international law. I think that, of course, it's well known that you can't attack embassies or consulates, but it has happened in the past. The United States bombed the Chinese embassy during its attacks against Kosovo back in 1999, claimed it was an accident. I don't think anybody's going to claim that Israel struck the Iranian consulate by accident. But as I mentioned, Israel saw a target of such a unique target that wasn't going to manifest itself again, the chance to wipe out Iranian leadership of the entire axis of resistance coordination effort. So they bombed them. Israel has just killed aid workers who were driving on a path that was coordinated in advance with the Israeli government and vehicles clearly marked. Israel has been killing journalists in violation of international norms and conventions. Why would Israel not bomb this consulate? And so, this is just Israel's in a very desperate situation right now. They, Benjamin Netanyahu gave a speech the other day that, that gave voice to this desperation. The world is against Israel. The world is lined up against Israel. Israel is as a wartime prime minister, and there is a whole bunch of pressure being put on him to bring an end to the Gaza conflict. And once the Gaza conflict is terminated or brought to an end through a ceasefire, he will probably be voted out of office or forced to remove. There'll be a collapse of his ruling coalition. And if that happens, then he's going to jail, because this is a man who has serious corruption charges lined up against him. And once he loses the immunity that being prime minister bestows upon him, he will go on trial, be found guilty, spend the rest of his life in jail. So from his perspective, his only hope of staying in power is to expand this conflict. And so, he's not worried about the consequences of striking the Iranian consulate because that only gives him the ability to stay in power. But I just come back to the notion that why are people surprised that Israel violates international law? They do so on a daily basis, and striking the consulate is just a continuation of past practice.
Iran hat bereits angekündigt, Vergeltung für die israelischen Luftschläge üben zu wollen. Dabei hatte Teheran explizit auch von den USA als den engsten Verbündeten Israels gesprochen. Mit welchen Vergeltungsmaßnahmen rechnest du? Siehst du eine Verbindung zu den verstärkten militärischen Angriffen auf Israel durch schiitische Milizen im Irak, wie etwa auf die israelische Stadt Haifa oder den Luftwaffenstützpunkt Tel Nov?
I think the Israeli strike on Damascus is of a order of magnitude that approaches the American assassination of Qasem Soleimani back in 2020, and it will require a retaliation by Iran. At that time, Iran chose an American base, a high-profile base, and gave advance notice that it was going to be attacked, and did so, struck it with precision-guided ballistic missiles. But the attack wasn't designed to kill Americans. And as a result, the United States was able to absorb the blow from Iran and not feel the need to retaliate. And I would imagine that a similar target is being looked for by Iran, a target that they can strike that says we struck Israel, that we retaliated, but in a way that doesn't demand an Israeli response, so that this incident could be put behind them. Neither Iran nor the United States wants an expanded war. But Iran will have to retaliate for this. It's a matter not just of national security, but national pride. And so we will wait and see. What target the Iranians will select. They've already put the United States on notice. The United States apparently has already warned Israel that there will be a retaliation, and so everybody's just waiting to see, what the nature of the target will be from Iran. But I think in the next 24 to 48 hours, you will see an Iranian retaliation. They have no other choice.
Siehst du einen Zusammenhang zwischen der Reaktion der USA auf den israelischen Angriff und dem jüngsten Telefonat zwischen US-Präsident Joe Biden und dem chinesischen Präsidenten Xi Jinping? Haben die beiden Staatschefs die Situation geklärt, um sie nicht zu einem Weltkrieg eskalieren zu lassen?
I think, again, I don't know the details of the call. We can only, or at least I can only speculate. But I think the United States understands that, China has growing clout in the region, that China was the one who brokered a normalization of relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and that, China is a nation, whether it's through BRICS or the Shanghai Cooperation Organization or through bilateral relations, has, an increasing level of credibility and clout amongst the Iranians, that Iran's future is a pivot to the East that requires good relations with China. And so I think the United States is seeking to use all diplomatic venues to communicate with Iran directly, and in the case of China, indirectly, that the United States is not looking for a broader conflict, that it's not in anybody's interest to have a broader conflict, and that the United States is willing to work with Iran to limit the consequences of the Israeli actions and any Iranian response. So I think that's what's happening here. In normal practice, the United States would also do the same with Russia, but we're not on speaking terms with Russia right now, so we can't take advantage of Russia's clout with Iran. But we continue to have normal diplomatic relations with the Chinese. So I think this phone call is, part of the overall effort to get the Chinese engaged diplomatically to, limit the escalation potential of this crisis.
Auf den Punkt gefragt. Wäre der Iran in der Lage, es mit Israel und den in der Region befindlichen US-Streitkräften aufzunehmen? Und wie tief ist die strategische Partnerschaft zwischen dem Iran, China und auch Russland? Würden Sie den Iran in einem möglichen Konflikt mit den USA unterstützen?
First of all, Iran has been preparing for this kind of conflict for years now, and they have sufficient resources to do a tremendous amount of damage to Israel and to American installations in the region. I once again point to the precision of the Iranian strike against the Al-Assad air base in Iraq back in early 2020 after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. Those weren't Iran's best weapons, but they were very good. Iran has the ability to destroy Israeli facilities in Israel and to destroy American military infrastructure in the region. But that doesn't mean that Iran won't pay a price, because Israel will retaliate, so will the United States, and the damage that will be done to Iran will be tremendous. Iran is a nation that's recovering from decades of economic and diplomatic isolation because of American-led sanctions. Iran is finally seeing, hope for a brighter future through economic engagement with BRICS, with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, with new regional economic partners. And all of this would come to a screaming halt if Iran was to get involved in a major conflict with the United States and or Israel. So, Iran does have the ability to inflict damage, but it's a war that Iran doesn't want or need at this point in time. And I think that the United States, by showing Iran that there is the potential for remaining on this path towards, economic revival, is that hopefully Iran will, not allow the lust for revenge to cloud its judgment about what's better for Iran in the future.
Lass uns über die strategische Lage Israels sprechen. 250.000 evakuierte Bürger aus den Nordgebieten entlang der Grenze zum Libanon, eine Bodenoffensive in Gaza, die keine Erfolge bringt und immense Opferzahlen produziert. Arabische Medien sprechen von über 3.700 verlorenen israelischen Soldaten. Hinzu kommt, dass das brutale Vorgehen Israels gegen die Palästinenser mit mittlerweile über 30.000 Toten, darunter über 13.000 Kinder und 8.500 Frauen, Israel weitgehend international isoliert. Welche Kriegsziele verfolgen Netanjahu und das israelische Militär und wie lange kann Israel diese strategische Lage aufrechterhalten?
Well, Israel's made it clear that its goals and objectives are actually very simple. The destruction of Hamas as a military organization and the elimination of Hamas as a politically viable institution. And Israel is failing on both counts. I mean, the prior to the recent offensive at the Al-Shifa hospital, there was a dialogue between Hassan Nasrallah, the head of Hezbollah, and the Al-Qassam brigades, the Hamas resistance movement, where Hamas was asked, do they need Hezbollah to intervene? Is it time for Hezbollah to intervene? And according to Nasrallah, he was told by Hamas, no, we don't need you to intervene. We've got this situation under control. And so, and then you have, the U.S. government had said that, Israel, after 6 months of conflict, 85% of Hamas's military structure still remains intact. And that Israel's not making adequate headway. You have Israeli defense officials acknowledging that they have not come even close to defeating Hamas militarily. Politically, Russia is working with Hamas and the Palestinian Liberation Organization to come up with a new ruling entity that incorporates Hamas, meaning that Hamas, far from being defeated, has only legitimized itself as the leadership entity amongst the Palestinian people that has the most credibility amongst the Palestinian people. And so Israel has failed on both accounts. And at the meantime, Israel is increasingly isolated in the world today. Their attack on the Iranian consulate, their violation of international norms and law will only further isolate Israel. And that's the sense of desperation that exists within the Israeli government, because this is not a sustainable posture. Economically, Israel is crippled. And even if this conflict ended today, the ability of Israel to recover economically is hampered by the fact that nobody in the world wants to do business with Israel anymore. I think Israel's looking at a scenario where if they continue to try to win this conflict in Gaza, they're creating the real conditions for the destruction of the Israeli state from within, not necessarily from without, but from within, where the Israeli people lose confidence in the Israeli state as a viable homeland.
Offen gefragt, wie wird dieser Konflikt in Gaza und auch dieser wachsende Konflikt im gesamten Nahen Osten enden? Siehst du eine mögliche militärische oder politische Lösung? Welche Schritte müssen unternommen werden, um den Krieg in Gaza zu beenden?
Well, ultimately, the war stops when Israel agrees to a ceasefire and the withdrawal of troops from Gaza. That's a political problem for the Israelis. And it only happened when Benjamin Netanyahu is removed from power. So that's the entire world knows what's needed here. Benjamin Netanyahu has to go. I mean, even a longtime Israeli supporter like Senator Chuck Schumer from the state of New York has identified Benjamin Netanyahu as the problem. As long as Netanyahu has a viable ruling coalition, though, he's not going to step aside. But we already see things fraying inside Israel, in addition to tens of thousands of people demonstrating every night for Netanyahu's ouster. We see the beginning of political response from within Israeli institutions designed to undermine this coalition. Israeli courts recently have decided that the exemption for students in yeshivas or these universities, they'll no longer be exempt, that Orthodox Jews will have to serve in the Israeli Defense Force. And if this goes forward as a matter of law, the far right-wing coalition is not going to be able to hold together. And once it starts to collapse, once parties start to withdraw from this coalition, then Netanyahu will, be faced with a vote of no confidence, and he will be removed from office. So I think right now basically the world is waiting for Netanyahu to either step aside or be pushed aside. And then once that happens, whatever replaces him will be called upon to bring an end to this conflict. Though, just keep in mind that Netanyahu is a survivor. he's managed to hold on to power when people thought that he couldn't. And the other thing is, there's no guarantee that Israel will be able to come together with a viable ruling coalition. It's a fundamentally divided nation, and in a time of conflict right now, there's no guarantee that there is a political entity in Israel capable of stepping up and filling the void. And so Israel could find itself in a state of perpetual political chaos that makes it difficult for Israel to take meaningful policy decisions, such as agreeing to a ceasefire in Gaza. So Israel's in a very difficult situation right now. When I say that the future of Israel is on the line here, that's no overstatement or exaggeration.